Good morning, everyone. It's a little bit after 8 a.m. here on November 21st, 2023. It's a Tuesday. I am Tom Kaczynski. Welcome to the show. Just going to talk about some random stuff today, a little preview for the show. Definitely going to talk about Argentina. I want to talk about use of language a little bit and how that leads to thoughts and expectations. We'll mention what's happening with Yemen. I think that's a key choke point. And as well, I might mention Armenia in passing. I think that's potentially important, little random bits, and I'm going to give you some book reports about things I've been reading. A number of you have asked me over different times what I actually read, how I kind of come to the conclusions, and the answer is I read a lot of weird things that don't necessarily connect to another. I read things I agree with. I read things I disagree with. It's important to know what people who disagree with you think, at least if their thoughts are profound. If they're just idiots you can ignore, well, you need to develop the way to figure that out. But hopefully there's nothing here you want to ignore. So welcome to the program. Like I said, the Venmo is CVCPRV and PO Box 343, Eagle Lake, Maine 04739. People ask when we're going to Argentina, and I tell you, the plan is to get down there to do an exploratory mission next spring. After we get through the winter here, we should have the resources then to do that. And if anyone wants to clan up, like I said, reach out. Not hard to find. Definitely wouldn't mind that, but not going to let it constrain what we do. So, as many of you will know, and some of you may not, it's fine if you don't, Argentina had their election on Sunday, and Javier Milei defeated Sergei Massa by a 55-45 count. Very excited for Argentina, for our friends down there. A lot is being said about Milei and Argentina by people who haven't studied it very much. If you need proof, I can put the stack of 20 Argentina books I have in my room, because we've been, as you know, studying this on this channel for a long time. I've learned a lot about not just Argentina, Chile, Bolivia, Uruguay, Paraguay, a little bit about Brazil, some about Peru and Ecuador as well. So South America's got its own interesting history. It's something we could talk about more, and if you have specific questions, put them in the comments and I'll get to them. But I'm excited for Argentina to go that way. What happened in the third wave of the election, the first one went basically kind of like a straw poll. Milei won, defeating Massa and Bullrich, who runs the sort of center-right party. What ends up happening is that the final two who were in the second one go ahead to the final. In that case, Massa defeated Milei in terms of the number of votes, but he didn't get enough to win outright. So everyone basically decided they were going to stand against Massa, who was the previous economic minister. And for those of you who don't understand Argentina's problem in a nutshell, Argentina has their inflation rate this year is going to be about 125%. Just imagine that. Imagine that every month when you go to the supermarket, prices are up 10%. It's just so bad in Argentina, you don't even know this, that literally menus don't write prices on them because they have to write them in and rewrite them every day, which is why Milei, with his suggestion that they go onto the U.S. dollar, was heavily supported. And this was a far more important election in Argentina for geopolitical implications than most people understand. Milei wants to have the dollar be the currency down there, and I'm not sure that'll happen or not because he only controls about maybe 20% of the seats in Congress, but he does have allies, and they may go for this. They call it the Cámara de Deputies, the Chamber of Deputies down there. Deputados, sorry. What you will see, though, is had Massa won, he was talking about putting in a Chinese-based CBDC. So there were some pretty big stakes in this election. And the fact is, Argentina is now not going down a BRICS route. It's going to go down a route that's more right-wing, that's linked to other countries in the Western Hemisphere, including the United States. And it makes a big difference for Mercosur as well, which is their big market down there, has now, 3 of the 4 biggest markets down there that are involved with that. In Uruguay, in Argentina, Colombia are now led by right-wing leaders, and only Lula, who, questionably won his election against Bolsonaro down there, is existing on the other side. And you do kind of wonder at some point if America maybe gets involved in these things, and maybe they do. Heck, maybe the agency should send me down there as a consultant, buy me a little house or something. No, I'm mostly joking, but you never know. Life is weird, and I know as much about Argentina as anyone can, Plus, I watch the stuff in Spanish, so. But anyway, him winning is a victory for people who were not living off of government assistance. And the alliance that had kind of run things down there was an alliance of the very rich who were robbing the rest of the people and the very poor who were milking it. Often, like you see in a lot of left-wing parties around the world at this point, it's a combination of people who exist on subsidy who don't want to give it up. And I'm not against subsidy necessarily. I want to be very clear. I'm not one of those right-wingers who says work or die. I don't think that way. And I don't think you can think that way in a world of automation. But I do think that people who are in that situation are often used cynically by governments. And Argentina, certainly with the overdeveloped public works department, which Milei has raged against, which goes back to Perón. I mean, for those who don't know the backstory of it, when Perón came to power, he was the Minister of Public Works. And it was because he had all these union laborers supporting him, even though they tried to kick him out. Every time they would do that, they would rage, the people, and eventually they put him back in. And that's how he managed to get the control of Argentina in the coup. And it's something to keep an eye on going forward, especially in Latin America, as you see a group of countries like Venezuela, Brazil, they support something called the Puebla Group. And the Puebla Group, basically, as best I can understand, is sort of a left-wing NGO type front that's designed to kind of make sure socialism comes forward in these countries. Milei doesn't want to go with that, at least on appearance of it. I mean, he has his problems, to be sure, as any doctrinaire libertarian would. However, that is not one of them, and Argentina's problems, like most countries, are primarily economic. But I do think the reality of it is things will probably get worse for Argentina for a while, and the inflation will continue into 2024, 2025, because as he tries to remove these different industries out of the way, there's going to be a lot of pushback. And he's talked about privatizing certain companies. And I understand that logic. I am not an orthodox libertarian. I did work for Ron Paul, so I'm very familiar with the philosophy. I got my street cred back to 2007, sort of my entry into politics in a bigger way. But what you would learn is that the idea is you do need decentralization of state power, and replacing it with corporate power isn't really the answer. So I wonder if Milei's healthy impulses might be modified by some of his center-right allies to a way where you see the assets of Argentina and Argentine companies not go to the state and not go to the highest bidder, but instead find some means of distribution to some sort of common fund. Think of like the Alaska Revenue Fund for oil as an example of a different model, or how Germany after the war, how they invested their unions with part ownership in a lot of the stakes of big firms like Volkswagen, Daimler, Benz, all these different companies. Bayer's another one. That was very successful in increasing the wealth of the working class in a way. And the working class was uplifted into being a managerial class, which I think would fit his views. It's not perfect. There's not a perfect solution. And Argentina has the problem that 40% of the country's in poverty. A lot of people don't own and won't own anything. So he needs external capital to come in. And if he does dollarize the economy, I think a lot of dollars will flow into Argentina, to be honest with you. And I think, frankly, if he makes this sort of immigration policy that would be logical, which is high skill, maybe culturally mindful. I mean, if he went out there and said, we're going to follow the policy of one Argentino Roca and invite a bunch of Europeans and Americans, those sorts of people here, and, didn't let in a lot of third world labor, you'd be stunned the high quality of people who'd come in there. And you, like anything else, like any other firm, an inducement. I mean, imagine having a country where white people were actually welcome. Can you think of it? It would be an amazing thing. And in Argentina, frankly, their demography is better than most states this side of northern New England in terms of that sort of thing. So we'll see how it plays out, definitely. But he has to look out for the interests of his own people. I am excited for it. It was something we very much wanted to see happen, and that we anticipate in the course of the next 6 months that it will improve and hasten the ease with which we are able to migrate, which is something we are definitely excited about. So something to keep an eye on, give you some backstory on it, because you telling you I'm excited doesn't do a lot of good for our visit to Patagonia, but it certainly does give some context, maybe for some background, and I'm certainly happy to answer questions, and maybe I'll even do a longer show on Argentina at some point. I mean, I know nobody watches this, and I know YouTube throttles this, so it's fine, but I do so because a few of you really value it, and I do it for you, so God bless each of you. All right, so I said Yemen. Let's hold that for a second. Yemen is threatening to cause a much bigger war. For those who don't have a natural knack of geography, think of where the Suez Canal is, the Red Sea east of Egypt connecting to the Mediterranean. Eventually that comes to a point called the Horn of Africa, Somalia, all those countries that never seem to have anything but pirates and problems. On the other side, on the Arabian Peninsula, in the southwest corner, is Yemen, and Yemen has had a proxy war between Iranian and Saudi Arabia backed militias and the Iranian-backed militia, which is not to say Iran runs them. They do their own thing, but they're friendly to them because religion gets caught up in this. It's a mess over there. The Houthis have decided that they're going to play pirates on anything that's related to Israel. So they took a ship the other day with a glider, a civilian ship, not a military ship. But you have to realize about 22% of the world's shipping goes through the Suez Canal. So if they start picking off ships there, it's going to cause major disruptions all throughout let's call it the Eastern Hemisphere. Goods will not be able to get to and from China and Europe, and that will cause all sorts of issues, not to mention agrarian issues. There's a lot of food that needs to come out of those areas heading eastbound to feed those countries that have high populations, like India is an issue. But nonetheless, no one wants to touch the Yemeni too tough, because realistically, their ability to shoot missiles versus the inability of civilian ships to defend themselves is one of those situations where realistically they could shut it down, and it would take a very long time to open it back up, and you'd have to develop alternate routes. The overland routes that China wants from the Belt and Road Initiative would be part of it. Going around Europe would be another thing, and frankly, going through the Arctic. That's been tested. Maybe it will happen. So a difficult situation that could lead to a much bigger war, because if Yemen could be something that pulls people in. So please keep an eye on that. What's happening over there. Definitely an important part of the situation. Another part of the situation you should be aware of is Armenia. Armenia basically has been bullied by Azerbaijan. Russia has more or less abandoned them. They've been their traditional sponsor, but they did elect a Western-leaning government in Armenia over frustration, so Russia's letting them have it. It's a complicated situation, and they're in a bad place because they're caught between a bunch of Turkic peoples, and Turkey and Azerbaijan have very good relationships. Georgia can't do very much. Syria has a heavy Russian contingent, and no one wants to see an independent Kurdistan. So the Armenians, and I think in the fullness of time, the Georgians might be stuck in a position where they might get the Kurdish treatment soon, which is to say you have a people stuck between multiple countries that don't have a land of their own. And should that happen, I think you may see Armenia get absorbed at some point by Turkey and by Azerbaijan, maybe as part of a broader Ottoman configuration. Lines on the map are going to start to move. The old world of set borders that were established after the end of World War II is gone. It's just a question of where those lines are going to move and who's going to grab who. Some of these things may be, countries working together. I could imagine, for instance, a future if Argentina ever got their act together, where you saw Argentina and Uruguay come together. I could imagine a lot of countries, Moldova into Romania, part of Western Ukraine into Poland, and frankly, Belarus into Russia. Not to mention the parts of Eastern Ukraine they're going to grab, which the fighting over there has gotten more violent. So those are things that, you should definitely keep an eye out for. And as we go forward with those sorts of issues, I don't think we're going to see the big war break off this winter, although I hold to the position that we'll have to see what Hezbollah does and how deeply the Israelis dig a hole for themselves. I mean, Israel's got a weird problem, right? Israel's problem is their backers are dying off. The kids hate them, with good cause, by the way. I mean, putting the Zionists there was a mistake for a lot of different reasons. In fact, we'll get into that. I'm going to split this into 2 programs of 20 minutes apiece, because I'm going to use the other 20 minutes for book reports, because I have that much to say, and it uploads better, and it will be better for you to watch it that way. I have no doubt of that. So you'll get a bonus show today. I guess that'll be good because I have some time to kill. Work's slow right now because it's the holiday, and working as a gig worker means that's what you got to deal with. So that's okay. I accept that, and I have you got to prepare for these things. But Israel. So Israel's ability to control the media is meandering, and they, as the panicked call from the ADL, from Greenblatt showed, they've lost the youth. And they've lost the youth because they see the hypocrisy of it. You can't go telling people they're victims, but they're not as big of victims as you, and expect that to stick, especially when empathy isn't really a trait of people's from areas outside of Northern Europe. I mean, it's just the truth of it. So now they're going to have to deal with it, and then they go and they're like, hey, you know what, we're going to remove the vax restrictions from people in the army. We want you to come back. They put these videos, these tough-looking white dudes out there. They think they're going to go fight. I mean, come on. We're not that stupid. I mean, maybe women would go for it and be like, oh, women want the men to do it. Like I was reading, yeah, it's a 4chan post, but it makes sense logically. That eventually they're going to put out a bunch of shows to encourage masculinity again and make women, attracted to it. Because, there's a lot of women, better or worse, who just follow and support whatever the current thing is. I mean, Lord knows, we saw this. I actually saw this. I was out at a store and I saw a guy, he had put the Ukraine patch and he put the Zionist patch over it. I was like, oh, that's great. Nice to know people think for themselves, right? But, whatever. So that situation is not going to get better. And I think that's maybe why Netanyahu's pushing deeper into it, because honestly, maybe their window has already closed, but it sure as hell is closing. And maybe they needed to do things a lot earlier when the people around them were not so strong. And the fact is, the Arab nations, which were somewhat arbitrary creations, are relatively well formed at this point. Iran isn't going anywhere. Saudi Arabia is probably not going anywhere. The only real danger those regimes face, to be honest with you, is if their people get so pissed off at Israel at the plight of the Palestinians that they won't be willing to go along with it anymore. So one of the things I think you may see, and if we had people who believed in realpolitik in the West, we would draw the conclusion, well, if you didn't have this Zionist country sitting there wouldn't be a lot of reasons to fight between Islam and Christendom. And you could maybe send, as a trade-off for looking the other way, say, are you going to take these people back into a new Palestine? And maybe, maybe you can make it work. I mean, originally the British mandate, you go back in history, was Transjordan. So imagine that instead of having Palestine, maybe you manage a transition and you'd have Jordan running, both of those countries. In the old days, back before nuclear weapons and Samson options and minorities running propaganda regimes, deals like this got made all the time. This is what things like the Congress of Vienna would solve and be like, well, you guys can get the booby prize. You can go live in the Ukraine that you left, which is where they came from. Kherson was the seat of the Khazarian Empire. If you do the research, we'll talk about that in the next segment, but it's something that is pretty interesting. But I want to close today's show with a thought, which is on the English language. And, you think of these words like cursive. I was writing about this on Twitter, putting a curse into writing, right? Or even a sentence, a judgment put down on someone, right? But it's also how we construct a certain thing. Or spelling, putting a series of symbols together to convey a certain meaning. Do you see the magical foundations of language? I mean, it wasn't a secret. People knew. Show you kind of a fun book by Bandler and Grinder. For those of you who can't read, because it might be mirror image for you. The Structure of Magic. These are the people who did neurolinguistic programming. They did another book, which I didn't read, but I'm holding here, Frogs into Princes, that really demonstrates that language has been constructed in a way where it is the means by which, through symbols, we create abstract concepts that define and develop and constrain our reality. And we have such faith that language is a accurate conveyance of reality that it literally locks us into a certain reality. So I want you to think very carefully, and this is a biblical lesson for you all. Christ had said to you that if you believe in him, you would do greater things even than he had done. That's in the book of John. You can go read it yourself, John 14, I believe. And what you begin to realize as you read these things is you begin to realize that we are constrained into a set of ideas, which is why certain lies are repeated, because we are being locked into language as a concept for controlling what reality's output. Our perception plays a key role in the creation of reality. The Heisenberg experiments, the slit experiment with the light cones. When you watch things behave differently than if you don't. You, as the observer, shape your universe in meaningful ways. And this is why they say if if you had the faith of a mustard seed, you could move mountains. We do have the faith of a mustard seed, but we have bad faith. And this is one of the things I'm going to just keep preaching because I believe it's absolutely central. In fact, I may even develop a whole church around the concept. But the thing is, we have bad faith. And what is bad faith? We believe in things that are against our interests because others tell us they are true, and we are indoctrinated with these truths by manipulation of our eyes, manipulation of our senses, right? Learn to see by faith, not by sight. You have all these different manipulations you have to get past, and if you can get a group of people, or even yourself, and you can live in a different world, you begin to realize these rules are flexible. The Matrix movies were telling you a lot if you could understand it, but like a child, you have to learn to unsee what you know and go back to where your imagination creates reality. This is a very hard thing for adults to do, especially in a world where, I use Robert Anton Wilson's great phrase, we are surviving and fighting for bio-survival tickets so that we can go about our lives, because we're all busy chasing dollars to survive. But it's really just, it's a terrible trick that's wasting a lot of our energy. But to understand that, remember, the world is bigger on the inside than the outside. We can look at all the problems on the outside. I can't fix that. But for a couple of you, what I can do is maybe share some things to awaken something on the inside. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close up this video here. We're going to do a second video where I'm going to do a book report about some things I've been reading. I'll share some things, and I'll share some of the books I haven't read yet, because I know a couple of you have asked me some questions. So maybe you will enjoy that. And like I said, I mean, actually, my evolving plan about going down there, I'd love to have like a little school, a little library, group of people just to chat with. And I really encourage you to think about getting out of the way and maybe coming along with us. Because, you know, if we had a couple people doing some things, I mean, we could actually do something pretty nice and be pretty comfortable. And I don't want to be living on top of someone. Everyone have their own house and stuff, you know, not a collective we're going to kill ourselves. But Lord knows I'm no Jim Jones. But something nice, you know, because I know a lot of people who are going to stay here and you're going to fight for it. Who are you going to fight? You're going to fight your neighbor over ignorance, or you're going to be bullet fodder for a regime that doesn't like you, fighting for a dying dollar. But think about what you're fighting for. Choose this day whom you will serve, my friends. In the Lord's mighty name, I just pray a blessing upon each of you. I'm Tom Kaczynski, the Venmo CVC PRB. I will be back after I drink a little coffee and get this to upload. Goodbye.